The introduction of psychiatric medications allowed for the possibility in the eyes of people who are treating mental health patients that they could go out and live in the community and live productive lives.
After decades of housing and treating thousands of people considered to be mentally ill, in the 1980s, the province of BC developed a plan to close Coquitlam's Riverview Hospital. The approach to mental health was changing, and institutions like Riverview were no longer considered ideal. In the years that followed, Riverview's wards were gradually shut down, and its patients moved out. The major shift in mental health practices started in the 1950s and 60s. Shuttering people away in large institutions was no longer seen as the best approach. Instead, so-called deinstitutionalization sought to try to integrate mental health patients back into communities. Money was also a factor in the decision to close, as Ottawa made funding for new hospitals the priority, rather than expand institutions like Riverview.
So the provinces was a bit of carrot and stick for them. They could build, put a psychiatric ward in at UBC Hospital or Vancouver General Hospital. So they were not. So that was the financial incentive.
Community integration for Riverview's patients was a long and complex process, and for some patients who spent decades there, a seemingly impossible one. Professor of Health Policy and Management Marina Moreau tracked down some of the last patients being transferred out of Riverview. During her research, one person in particular caught her eye.
They were just going through a list and saying, oh, you could talk to this person, you could talk to this person, and then they said, oh, what's going to happen to Betty, when she gets transferred? She's lived here her whole life. And they were just talking with each other, it wasn't we weren't interviewing them at that point. And I said, what do you mean Betty's lived here her whole life? She goes, oh, well, she was born here at Riverview. And I said, so she, was there anything wrong with her? It's like, well, no, not really.
By the 1980s, parts of Riverview were closed entirely as the government continued to move more patients into regional care.
So it was like from one facility to another facility. But there was not new investment in community-based mental health care.
Despite the gaps in community supports and services for mental health, the final patients were transferred out of Riverview in 2012. And that's when the facility closed its doors. But it wouldn't be for good. The demand for mental health and addiction services didn't go away. In fact, today it's never been greater. And so the province has once more turned its attention to the Riverview lands. In the third and final part of our series, we take a look at what could be a rebirth of Riverview. In Coquitlam, Ashley Burr, City News.